Lord, I ask for your forgiveness. What I'm about to say should have never came out of my mouth. Wilder, you ain't shit. For one man to talk about another man's son and to talk about crippling a man in the ring, you ain't nothing, man. You got the heavyweight championship. That's about it. Outside of that, 2 wives, 3 girlfriends, 3 kids you know about, a disabled child, kids on the side. Your life is all fucked up. You want to come at me with some bullshit? Be a man. Step up. Get the paperwork done. Send the contract over. You and I, we can square this off in the ring, and you'll lose the only thing you've ever had good in your life. Send it over. My revenge is coming.
It's fair to say that Dominic Breazeale was seething in that video that he posted to his Instagram account. Just see it in his body language. Not a happy chappy. And he felt compelled to do that video and post it after Deontay Wilder, who is the WBC champion. Remember that Dominic Breazeale is the WBC mandatory challenger. So Wilder told Fight Hype, "We already know what Dominic Breazeale is doing. He's trying to talk me into fighting him, which is not working. My mind is already made up on that Breazeale fight. And when it do happen, I'm going to make sure he brings his son onto the stage to look the man in the eye that's going to cripple his daddy." You heard that right. Wilder says he wants to bring Breazeale's son on stage to sort of say, "Look, I'm going to cripple your father." It's a pretty ruthless statement, to say the least, from Deontay Wilder. Did he go too far? Probably. But this is boxing after all, and this sort of stuff happens, and it's not new, and maybe we shouldn't be shocked by it, because it absolutely happens. And in terms of Deontay Wilder, should we be shocked that it came from him? Probably not. If it had come from Joseph Parker, someone mild-mannered who you wouldn't expect it from, we probably would be shocked. But Wilder has a history of making inflammatory statements. And you might well remember earlier this year he talked of wanting to catch a body on his record. He literally wants to kill someone in the ring, turn someone's lights out for good. Here's the thing. So Wilder's statement, while crass and designed to shock, it's Dominic Breazeale's statement, Dominic Breazeale's reaction, that's actually become the story. Without it, and if he had just ignored what had been said, this wouldn't be nearly as big a deal. There would have been some headlines, there would have been some chatter, some talk, social media that picks these sort of things up pretty quickly. But it's the reaction that's made this way bigger than it probably otherwise would have been. But what it does do, it reinforces the bad blood. It puts heat back into the rivalry. Because let's face it, no one's really been talking about a Wilder and Breazeale matchup while Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury have been in the picture. We've been talking about Anthony Joshua and more recently Tyson Fury for the last few months. So Dominic Breazeale, he hasn't really got a look in. He's sort of been waiting, sitting on the bench, waiting to be called. He wants his fight with Deontay Wilder, and he's largely been ignored. But his reaction to this, it makes the story bigger. It sort of puts some heat back into the rivalry. And indeed, the WBC is not actually going to call the mandatory fight until later in the year. And that gives Wilder some leeway in the meantime to pursue a fight with Fury. So Dominic Breazeale, while in a very good position, sort of sitting with that mandatory slot, he's a little bit in the position of he's looking from the outside in. Sort of close but no cigar. But the heat in the rivalry, it might prove to be a little bit short-lived because, as I say, he's sort of outside the tent looking in. And he may actually just have to wait a while. He might end up sitting and waiting on this mandatory spot for a long time. Because if Wilder takes a Fury fight, and then you've got Joshua on the horizon, and the WBC grants a few exemptions, he could be sitting for quite some time. And sure, there's a lot of variables, but one of them is that Dominic Breazeale doesn't fight Deontay Wilder for quite some time. Not just a few months or several months, but it could be, potentially for a year or more or never. I mean, it's very hard to say. And while Breazeale was claiming that he won't continue to talk about Deontay Wilder his statement on social media where he's blasting Wilder is going to be his last for some time. It's a hollow statement. He will literally disappear into the ether if he doesn't say something, make some noise. If he disappears for a few months, well, you can kind of guarantee that he's just going to disappear from the radar. He needs to actually be latching onto statements and comments as he has for this one. Just to stoke the fire and help maintain some momentum in this rivalry. That rivalry, it began about 18 months ago when Breazeale alleges that Deontay Wilder's entourage jumped him at the hotel following the Deontay Wilder and Gerald Washington fight. That was, of course, on February 25th, 2017. And Dominic Breazeale, he was also on that card. He's a PBC fighter. He was facing Izu Ogono. He won that fight. Very exciting fight. It really helped the card on that night. But Breazeale alleges that, he was jumped. His children were present. And the alleged incident involved, him getting sort of jumped and beaten up. His children were there. Hence the sensitivity to his son being uttered from Deontay Wilder's lips. It's literally red rag to a bull stuff. And Breazeale, he's gone as far as taking the matter to court. So there is definitely no love lost between the pair. And just say, and don't bite my head off for saying this, say the Fury fight doesn't happen for whatever reason, because at the moment it's 99% complete, but it hasn't been signed. But say a Wilder and Breazeale fight has to fill the breach if that fight doesn't get made. This latest incident, it helps add some drama and intrigue to keep us interested. It's kind of put this fight back on the map because, you're sort of forgetting about Dominic Breazeale because he hasn't been fighting for quite some time. He hasn't had a fight this year. His last fight was against Eric Molina, and that was confirmed as a final eliminator, and then it was changed to, no, it's just an eliminator. And then Breazeale was acting smug on social media saying he was Deontay Wilder's mandatory, and we were all going, what are you talking about? You're not the mandatory. But then he was confirmed as the mandatory, even though he wasn't in the number one position in the WBC rankings. It was all strange, it was all weird, but he was promised that if he fought Berman-Stavern, he would become the mandatory. And Berman-Stavern was ultimately elevated to the top fight. Eric Molina fills in, and that fight, it continued and carried the weight in terms of confirming his mandatory status after he won it. So Dillian Whyte obviously felt shortchanged from that. Got off track here, completely off, but what I do hope is that Dominic Breazeale, he stays in shape. Because obviously he's got a lot of motivation now. I hope he stays ready. Because you can't actually trust sometimes what these guys are saying. You see a little bit on social media. I mean, Lucas Brown, classic example. He looked like a guy that was training hard, and actually he was doing little bits and pieces, but he was curating his social media. He wasn't staying in shape. Berman-Stavern, another classic example. He had months to prepare for a Deontay Wilder fight, or even a Dominic Breazeale fight, because that's ultimately what he was going to be fighting in. But he got some step-aside money from Wilder, but he ultimately faced Stavern after Ortiz tested dirty for some PEDs. Well, that was the allegation. Stavern steps up, turns up to the weigh-in in terrible condition. 15 pounds overweight, didn't look like he'd been training, and he got starched. And you would hate to think that Dominic Breazeale would fall into the same sort of trap, not really training as hard as he should, and then come into a fight against Deontay Wilder in poor shape. Because it's not going to help him. Because Dominic Breazeale, he's a big guy, he's a strong guy, but he's slow and hittable. And I get that maintaining motivation to fight when there's no date on the horizon is going to be hard. But he's got to do it. And let's hope that this comment from Wilder can prove to be some motivation for Dominic Breazeale, just to keep him working hard in the gym, eating right, preparing right, for whenever that fight is. What do you make of this latest situation? Deontay Wilder says he wants to bring Breazeale's son on stage to tell him, to look him in the eye and say, I'm going to be the one crippling your father. It's, yeah, that's some pretty out there sort of stuff. But he said the comment, it's not really out of character because he says these sort of out there things. Wants a body on his record, thinks he's better than Mike Tyson. He is the hardest puncher of all time, most feared of all time. These are some of the things that Deontay Wilder is saying. So it's not exactly new that he's running his mouth, flapping his gums. But has he taken it too far this time? Should he have brought Dominic Breazeale's son, and I believe Breazeale's got a couple of sons, but should he have brought this into the equation? I mean, because obviously what you did see was Dominic Breazeale firing back, talking about Wilder's children, talking about Wilder's private life. Should Breazeale have done that? Obviously it was a reaction, but did he go too far as well? Or do you think this has actually helped keep some of the momentum, some of the interest in a potential fight between Dominic Breazeale and Deontay Wilder? They may meet, they may not. You just don't know what's going to happen. Because a year or 6 months in boxing, it can be a long time. And who knows what's going to happen. Tyson Fury, he looks like he's on the horizon. And who knows, if Fury is beaten by Wilder, Wilder could face Anthony Joshua next. Dominic Breazeale could end up sitting for a long time. Or who knows, he could be next. Let's hope he stays ready. What do you make of it all? Drop a comment loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter. Boxing_squared. I'm out.